My name is Professor Brett Davies. I'm a barrister of the High Court of Australia. We are today going to look at best practice with structuring a family farm and also succession planning. I'm going to go through 5 documents or 5 common structures which your accountant will probably recommend one of these. So let's have a look here. And I love it to inspire children. It's just critically, as a father myself, it's so challenging to make sure the children are motivated to continue on the work which you have done. I grew up on a farm and I understand the importance of the farmer when it comes to encouraging the children to become involved in not just the farm but also in the business structures of the farm, the tax and the balance sheets and things like that, which we're going to come back to. I'm going to look at 5 structures. The family trust, a farming family trust, which you can build around a law firm's website. Consider unit trust if there's more than 2 children. The partnership structure, the company structure, and finally a self-managed super fund. Very interesting. So let's begin with the family trust. It's the most common form of structure that the farmer will use. It allows mum and dad, and it only pretty much works for just mum and dad, to operate with complete control how their income is distributed. So one year they can distribute to their oldest son, next year to the youngest daughter, and they can change that every year. Where it falls down is in 2 ways. Firstly, it only goes for 80 years. And farms can go on for hopefully hundreds of years. So there's another alternative, and that's the 3-generation testamentary trust will, which is designed for farmers, which has got the usual forms of protection, such as divorce protection trusts, in case one of your children gets divorced, bankruptcy trusts in the will, consider person clause to stop the in-law from challenging, special disability trust in case one of the grandchildren suffers some problems. That's an alternative. The other problem with a family trust is its life expectancy. Unlike, say, a company, it can only go for 80 years. If you're in South Australia, you've got a South Australian farm, and you've got a legal consolidated family trust, then your family trust will go forever. And if other states follow South Australia, which I hope they do, and I've been predicting that since 1988, incorrectly, then you'll also be able to keep the family trust going forever. At the moment you can't, except in South Australia. So that's family trusts. There is a training course on this. And you need to know how these vehicles work. Because at the end of the day, you are going to be running it. You need to train your spouse on how to run it. And then you need to train your children from birth and your spouse in the moment you get married to him or her. There's a free training course on how family trusts operate. When you go into the accountant's, lawyer's or financial planning's office and they're banding around words saying, oh, the appointer should be this, the backup appointer should be your children, and you don't know what they're talking about, then you're a fool. You must make sure, just as you know all about combine harvesters and how to grow canola and whether sheep's going to be better than wheat next year, you also need to know, and your family need to know, how these business structures work. Now, the next structure is the unit trust. The unit trust is particularly good because why a family trust fails or doesn't work very well once you and your spouse are dead, because let's say there's 2 children running it, because the appointors, who's the controller of the family trust, have to act unanimously, and that's a pretty tough gig, particularly if one of them's getting a divorce or is dead or of unsound mind. Unit trust could be your answer. Unit trust is a bit like a company in that it gets units like shares in a company, and those units can be put into your will, your 3-generation testamentary trust will, and transfer to the children. No stamp duty, no capital gains tax. Unit trusts are very popular. And again, if you're interested in unit trusts, then there's a training course on that as well, on how they work. Make sure you know what a unit trust is and how it works. You're going to have these vehicles for 10, 20, 30, 80 years. Now, I'll come back to the partnership because it's not a very common way of owning property. It can be and used to be, but not that popular these days, unless you're running it through a 3-generation testamentary trust. Let's look at the company. So the company structure goes on forever. So it gets rid of that 80-year problem. And the company has some problems, and that is that the company, while it can go on forever, you can't manipulate it as far as the leasing of the farmland from the company to the operating partnership. Well, with a family trust and unit trust, you can lease from the unit trust to family trust the farm to the partnership for a peppercorn rent, $5,000 a year. You can't do that with a company. It's got to be at arm's length. It's the same problem with the self-managed super fund, which we'll see in a minute. The other thing is that if you want to get some sort of loan or money moving between some of the family, the children and your spouse, you can do that in a family trust and unit trust pretty easily, but you can't do that in a company. You cannot gain an advantage from a company. If you plonk money into the company, then it becomes very difficult to get it out unless you've got a loan agreement going in. If you're trying to get money out of the company, you just can't do it unless it's for a certain interest rate set by the government each year under a Division 7A loan agreement, which you can read all about online. There's a training video on that as well. The fourth most common way of owning your farm is through a self-managed super fund. Now, the farmer is like the classic small business owner. They don't like other people looking after their money. They like to be in control. It's a classic issue of the small business owner. And therefore, you don't like the fact that you get some money and you send it across to a super fund, and they're on the 18th floor of the Rialto building in Melbourne, and in 40 years' time, you're going to get that as retirement. It doesn't sit well with many small business owners. What do? You don't want to lose out on this tax environment. I mean, the tax rate on a self-managed super fund is normally 15% or less, and the capital gains tax when you come to sell an asset out of a self-managed super fund, if you've held it for more than 12 months, is 10%. 10%! So it's a really good vehicle. A self-managed super fund, talk to your financial advisor and your accountant about setting up a self-managed super fund and potentially owning some of the farmland in that vehicle as well. However, much like the company, the self-managed super fund has to be very careful on how it leases commercial property to the farmer. It can do it legally because commercial property is like a farm, like most farms, is allowed to be leased to the members and members' relatives. It's very, very useful. Now let's come back to the partnership. The partnership is the fifth most common way of holding the farmland. It's got some risks attached to it, such as asset protection. Now, asset protection is a big issue, so I'm just going to go and I'm going to do a search and you should do this as well, in Google for asset protection. And I just hope Legal Consolidated comes up first, and it does. There it is. So the number one leading law firm in Australia at the moment in asset protection strategies is Legal Consolidated Barristers and Solicitors. We've worked in this area since 1988, and it will take you through, and your spouse, you and your children should read this. You should study it on how asset protection is so important. And the partnership breaks this a little bit because in a partnership, it's owned by you, but if you're also operating the farm, then you've got a problem. You got some guy puts his hand into the combine harvester, the arm comes off, you are responsible for it. Whereas if it was in a family trust is leased into the partnership, and the partnership fails, Not a big problem, because well, it is a problem, and I'm sorry for that person that lost their arm, but the exposure to asset protection is less if it's in a landlord farming family trust. Now, the common way of owning these farming partnership structures, which are clearly documented on the website, is to set it up, lease the farm from the structure, either for peppercorn rent if you wish. Talk to your accountant about that, unless it's in a self-managed super fund or a company. Let's talk about loans for a minute. Let's have a look at the Family Trust Planning Toolkit. Now, this is a free resource for you, your accountant, and your financial advisor. It will take you through everything that we know about these structures and how they affect the farmer. The unit trusts, how the training videos, partnerships, self-managed super funds, leasing. You can actually do a lease on our law firm's website geared to lease from the self-managed super fund to you. And it takes you through the rules and regulations. Again, a wonderful resource for you, your accountant, your advisor, and your lawyer. I just want to make a final comment, and I see here that the law firm has used one of the images of a child on a billionaire's shoulder, and I want to, as a father, I want to suggest to you, you need to do this as well. You know, you're big into setting the children to look after the farm and get them involved, but you can't isolate and keep them away from the lawyer, the accountant, the advisor. They need to be blooded in the ways of the tax and these structures. Now, that billionaire took his child in to an election of a new president, and he's blooding that child. You need to do as well. You need to start that from birth. So enjoy these free resources in this free toolkit, and have your accountant or lawyer or financial advisor or yourself telephone us, but start building the document first. We do not give you advice on how to structure it, but we will give you advice on how to build the document and then how to look after it. Enjoy the free resources of Legal Consolidated.